Hi, I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva, and with me today is Ross Matsuda, our systems engineer focused on the Apple platform. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And you see my screen, Ross?
Yep, looks good.
See our beautiful faces, our titles, our names, our Consultants Network logo. If anyone has any questions about that. Today's topic, Macs need security too. Not sure why there's a comma there, but that's where it is. Maybe it belongs there, maybe it doesn't. As always, first some news. Monterey, macOS Monterey, we got another update, Ross. It's kind of a monthly, not quite monthly occurrence, but last time we talked about 12.4, 12.5 dropped, what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
I think it's been about 2 weeks now.
Yeah. And as always, we continue to see some issues with our challenges with updates. So I do want to mention again that we do have, we've got the install macOS Monterey in Mac Manage. That's for upgrading. If you haven't upgraded to Monterey, we really encourage you to do so. We want to try to get as many clients as possible on the most up-to-date and secure operating system, Monterey, before going to Ventura in the fall when Apple releases that.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. And so our hope is that as the Ventura betas are continuing to chug along, things are looking pretty good. There's still a lot more work to do though. The more people that we have already on Monterey, you're able to take advantage of a lot of new features, especially a lot of better security patches. And we've also got some really cool new security features coming up in Ventura that we can talk a little bit about later on today. But the big thing I want to clarify about this is that the 12.5 update, we've been historically running into some trouble with Macs that attempt to talk to Apple servers and find this update, but they're just not seeing it. And oftentimes, this item that Ben's bringing up there, the software update kickstart process, that tends to fix it. You can run that, reopen system preferences, go to software update, and then usually the update will appear. We're seeing some instances where this isn't quite enough, where even after running it, that update's still not showing up the way we'd expect. In those situations, the quickest way to just get this done, get your Mac updated to that newest version of Monterey, is to go into Mac Manage and actually run that full installer. Now, it takes a little bit longer. Usually takes 1 to 2 hours, so we do recommend doing that sort of once you're done for the day. And you can see there that we've got the 12.5 general installer ready to go. Click that. Your Mac will make sure it has enough free space. Ask if you want to proceed. You can click yes, let's do this thing, and then just let it run. It should take care of itself from there. If the computer requires you to type in a password to start the process, it'll ask. But generally speaking, it's fully automated once you get past that first, yes, I want to do this. So just be aware if you're running into issues where you're not seeing that newest build available, try the kickstart. If that doesn't work, full installer is absolutely the way to go.
So Ross, you're saying if you don't see it, run the kickstart, and then probably just check in with us before running this, but you can run macOS Monterey 12.5 over the top of 12.4, and it won't do anything other than update you. It just takes a long time.
Yeah, that is correct. It does take longer because it is still, running a full OS installer, right? So it's overwriting a ton of system files.
There's no data loss.
Correct. Yeah, it leaves personal data alone. It leaves third-party software alone. It just drops, the full OS back into place.
So obviously, we only want to do that if we absolutely have to. Restarting your computer is always a good first step. Running the kickstart command second. If you're still having problems, you can run this. But we'd also appreciate hearing about it so we can continue to give that feedback to Apple. And for our point of contacts, our primary contacts at our client locations, VisionBot is the place you can go and see if your fleet is up to date or not. If they're not on Monterey, talk to us. We have a process and a communication template we can give your team to point them here and prepare them for the upgrade. And if they're not applying the updates, you know, it could be that they're literally not seeing them, and we want to get past that. It is frustrating that Apple still, it seems like rather than improve the update process, they continue to get worse at it.
There's that definitely is what this feels like. As a devil's advocate, there are actually a lot of new software update commands and controls that are going to become much more mainstream in Ventura. So this might be an indication of them investing more time and energy in this new system and sort of abandoning the old one rather than
to get it ready for Ventura.
Yeah.
So here's VisionBot. This is actually a screenshot of my computer. I'm running 12.5. And I just wanted to show you, we made some updates to VisionBot. One is very minor. We finally were able to, through some new advanced HTML, standardize the size of these boxes, so it's much cleaner. I enjoy that very much. And then we added a notes feature, which you will only see if we have a note attached to your device. Currently, only we can add notes. They show up here, but in the future, we hope to enable our clients to make notes and save them. So this is an example note, but in some cases, we may have reasons why endpoint protection is disabled or not encrypted, or any number of things that we need to remember about a computer. And we want to see that, and our service desk wants to see that. Our clients want to see that. It just makes it easier so we don't continue to spin our wheels asking the same question over and over because we forget or we don't communicate it. So this is, I'm really excited about this new note feature. If you want to see a note, just open a ticket, we'll add it to the device. I did want to also iterate last month, we mentioned July 1st, new email and phone number, but it didn't actually say what that was because I think we were waiting on a web page to get updated. So, whoa, let me get way ahead of myself here. Go back here. So if we go to our help center, support.ntiva.com, request support, we do have this ways to contact us, support menu on macOS, email, caller email, and then service desk details and tips. I want to point that out because this is some information that was in the ticketing system that is now online. And for some of our legacy clients, it may be slightly different than what they've experienced in the past. Email versus calls and how we handle those. So if you have any questions, this is a great resource to refer to. And I mentioned support menu. We updated support menu with the new email and the new phone number. And this differs based on your region. So we have clients in different regions. And currently, if you go to our support page, you need to find your region. You know, Midwest has slightly different information than the West and the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. Eventually, we may get all that consolidated, but currently it's different. Support menu is updated for you and your fleet. However, if you're not up to date, you're not going to see support menu because support menu is a modern Swift application that requires modern macOS. So it needs macOS Big Sur or later. And if you're not running macOS Big Sur or later, please contact us so we can get you on Monterey. And if you're running Big Sur, I want to see you on Monterey too.
Also true, because remember, folks, Apple always supports the newest operating system and the two before it. So we call that an N-2 cadence. What that means is that we can expect the last true security update, the last patches to deal with known live exploits for Catalina, macOS 10.15.7. The last one of those that we will expect pretty much ever is going to be around when Ventura launches this fall. So after that, those operating systems won't be getting these necessary security patches. It is very, very important that we get your fleet off of that OS and onto one of the newer ones.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. Mac needs security, and you know the reason the title is Mac needs security too is basically because I still see an outdated view of the Mac OS and Macs in general. I think the Apple platform has a lot of outdated views out there, especially amongst Windows-centric populations. But this one is not just on a Windows outdated point of view. This is people who use Macs tend to believe that they are more secure. And that was probably true back in the day when we had very limited options. The internet was still young, and we had very few Macs in the world. Today, that number of Macs has grown. They're a much bigger target, and really, security threats have changed dramatically. We no longer really care what platform you're on. It could be an iPhone, it could be an Android, it could be a Mac, it could be a Windows, it could be a tablet. The threats are real, and the bad guy doesn't care if you're running a Mac or not. So that's where we get into this defense in depth, layered security. So what we're going to talk about today is really focused on macOS security, but it's not an end all be all. This is just a reminder that a good defense for any business is to have several layers of security. And this is a nice little diagram of what that looks like. You've got your procedures, your policies, your physical controls like locking the front door. Then you've got your technical controls, locking down your network, your software, your hardware. And I would say what we're talking about today, Ross, on macOS, kind of a combination of technical controls for hardware and software. Would you agree with that?
I would. And there's one thing I would like to clarify, and it's that when we talk about Macs needing security, this is not to say that the Mac operating system itself is less secure than it has used to be. Apple's gone really far out of their way with a lot of really powerful built-in hardware and software controls that they continue to update to help keep the devices secure. And so there's a lot of great tools that are built in. The key change that's really happened over time is that historically speaking, Apple devices have not been targeted as frequently by bad actors simply because they represented such a small market share, right? You could write something to 95% of Macs in business, or 5%. Usually used to be even lower than that. And so we're just seeing more things like malware, ransomware, things like that now are targeting the Apple ecosystem, where in the past they hadn't, because it just wasn't worth their time. So again, we're not saying that there are like fundamental flaws or that the Mac OS and iOS are insecure platforms. It's just that bad actors are now acknowledging the opportunities of paying more attention to these platforms.
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say, especially because there's nobody here from Ntiva representing the Windows side, I'll say it, that Macs are more secure than Windows. However, the threats out there have changed dramatically. So we just want to be prepared. We don't want to be the one house on the block with the unlocked door, is basically what I'm saying. So let's do some basic, take some basic steps to secure the house. I also want to point out on the Ntiva blog, which if we go to Ntiva.com, seems like my internet gets a little sluggish when I'm on a webinar. Seems really sluggish. There we go. I had to refresh it. Okay, so Ntiva.com, resources, blog. And if you want to zoom in on cybersecurity or filter to cybersecurity, Dr. Jerry Craig, head of our security team, just posted this article August 2nd. Last month, we had this essential guide to endpoint security for business. So these are all good resources. But today we're going to dive a little deeper into what we call the macOS security standards. And this is a standard that Ross and I have worked on probably for years, Ross, refining this. And this can be found, if you want to follow along, going back to our help center, and that's different than our blog. So our help center is support.ntiva.com. And under Apple Toolkit, we have this area, macOS security standards. So this is what we're going to talk about, macOS security standards. And these standards were built on, what's happening, Ross? This is why I haven't used Safari. I've been using Chrome. I get this issue with Safari where it just stalls like that and I have to refresh. So I may just switch to Microsoft Edge because Safari is not satisfying my needs. Okay, macOS security standards. We mentioned here that this is kind of based on helping clients through several security needs that they have, whether it's CMMC, NIST. I know we've done some work with ISO. These are all different standards that we do hope to eventually map more concisely. We have a to-do list item to map these to those special, they're not security policies. What are they? Security audits, security stand.
You'll usually find an alphanumeric code of some kind under each of these standards that says that is in reference to this particular requirement for a password policy or this particular requirement for end-to-end or device encryption. And so we're hoping to eventually get those mapped out so we can say like, oh, by contacting Ntiva and implementing this standard, we're satisfying this specific request or need for our security audit.
Yeah. So let's go through these rather quickly because I like to get through them all and why we kind of mention this as a standard, and then we'll summarize it at the end. But the concept here, and this is one of the few that has kind of a double listing, but the idea is this is the name, this is kind of the area where it lives, this is why you want to consider implementing this, and then these are some of the controls. We also have some links where we can that link to Apple related user guides. So here we've got these two, which really have to live together, right? In order to have a screensaver, we have to have a lock, or rather in order to have a lock, we have to have a screensaver. You could probably say it better than me, Ross.
Sure, but the basic idea with this control is we're all very familiar. If you're using an iPhone or an iPad and you set it down, you walk away from it. If you don't do anything, usually the screen locks itself after a couple minutes, depending on what your settings are. And you come back, you try to open it back up. You have to type in your password, or use Touch ID, Face ID, and you're back in. These settings mimic that for the Mac. For the Mac, however, the reason we had to split this off into two separate items is because that screen lock behavior is still considered a function of the screensaver. And so what we've done for this is try to sort of harden your machine by making sure that if you move away from your Mac for a certain amount of time, it kicks on the screensaver, and that screensaver requires the password to get back into it. So this, if you're on a company machine at a coffee shop or a hotel or in any public location, there is at least a usable minimum time where it's going to make sure that if your device is compromised physically, the user can't get into it.
Mm-hmm. And I have a habit of locking my screen anytime I walk away from the computer. I even do this at home, which may sound crazy, but I have a fear of the computer being open and my cat walking across the keyboard and sending unknown email messages, which I believe is technically possible. So I just lock the screen so that cannot happen. And I do it from the touch bar, although I know the touch bar is not going to be around forever and not everyone has it. So there you can also just go up here and lock the screen, and there's a shortcut you could learn right here. But even if I forget, and it's especially helpful in public spaces, if I forget, this will kick in at a certain period of time if I'm idle. Correct, Ross?
Yeah, yes, indeed. That's the whole goal here.
Okay, let's go back, keep moving. Endpoint protection, this one's pretty straightforward. We do recommend some type of endpoint protection. We have standardized on sort of two solutions, although Sentinel-1 is widely used at Ntiva. We were using Malwarebytes before coming to Ntiva, the Apple team. So we still have some people using Malwarebytes, which I still think is a great solution. And then we do have Sentinel-1 with an additional security team back behind it. So these are great solutions. Some of our clients do bring their own endpoint protection. We have some larger enterprise clients that have agreements with other solutions, and we can help deploy that as well. But the point is, you really should have some type of endpoint protection. This is basically modern day antivirus running on your computer today. It's something that the Mac users have long ignored, or we had a really, really bad experience back in the Norton days. It was just kind of like horrendous, but the tools are much better now, and this is something that you should have. So I don't want to spend too much time on this unless you have a comment, Ross, you want to make?
Nope, we good.
Okay. File vault encryption. So this is something that we've been encouraging for a long time for anyone who has a notebook and an SSD. The old spinning disk hard drives, no. And if you have one of those, you probably have an old computer anyway, which I would also say no. I mean, File Vault pretty much is immediate on or off. It's just Apple, and as always, requires consent. And in order to get consent, there's this pop-up window that says your administrator requires that you enable File Vault. Enable it now will prompt you for your passcode. You enter your passcode. That ensures that you can not only encrypt your hard drive, but you can decrypt it. Meaning when you restart, you have to supply your passcode in order to decrypt it. And that's another reason why I think it's a good idea to get consent, because if you encrypted a hard drive and someone didn't know their passcode, that would be a problem. And I know a lot of people who are accustomed to rarely restarting their computer, and they sometimes forget their password, and that can be a problem. Now, if they're in our system and we file vault it, then we have a way to get around that, but it can still be a pain. So Ross, I will say, I've noticed that some people do ignore this message. They say cancel.
Yep.
Apple still doesn't give us a you have absolutely positively have to do this now button, like with no cancel.
We can defer it so that it only triggers during log out. But we can also change that, say that it'll ask the user during log in. If that's the case, then if this window, instead of appearing as you log out or shut down or restart your machine, this will actually pop up when you try to log into your account. And then if you hit cancel, you don't get to go into your account. It's a little aggressive, but terribly effective if we need to just to worry about compliance.
Yeah, I do want to, I'll talk about that near the end. But these are things that we've had, these are tools we've had for a while, and they keep getting incrementally better. And we keep getting asked to be more aggressive in implementing some of these. So that's one of the reasons we're talking about it. But today, if you're a client, you can go into VisionBot and you can see who has encryption on or off. And if you want to be more aggressive with encryption, please let us know. We're trying to make this part of the standard onboarding process. But if you onboarded even a year ago or several years ago, you may not have all the machines that you want today encrypted. So VisionBot will tell you what you have, and then we can help you get there. Let's go back to firewall. Now, firewall, I don't know, this is relatively new. Apple's had a software firewall for many years, but I know it was kind of not very good at one point and almost unusable. But that's really no longer the case. I know I've been running it for I don't know how many months or years. Any comments on this, Ross?
Not really. It's a pretty simple, straightforward application. It is important to bear in mind that this is an application firewall, right? This is obviously not a hardware firewall. This is not even a system firewall. It's an application firewall, which is all about controlling incoming and outgoing traffic to and from specific apps and processes on your computer. Back in the day, we used to have problems where you turn this on and all scores of things could break and start misbehaving. Nowadays, the default settings that Apple provides seem to be much more agreeable and still allows the user to explicitly add or explicitly deny certain types of traffic if it comes up. So this tends to be, enabling this for your organization will likely have a very small footprint. People will not notice much has changed, but it does help resolve a couple possible security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and I want to point out, if you're sitting at a personal owned Mac, go turn this on right now. Just turn it on. You'll be fine. If you're a client of Ntiva and you want this on, let us know, and we can deploy. What we're talking about here are deploying policies that will enforce these settings. So in this situation, we could deploy turning on the firewall across your entire fleet rather than you asking your team to do it, or even doing it yourself manually. That's just a waste of time. Okay, after the firewall, we got Gatekeeper. This is a little known section, and we got two pieces here. And I think the one piece we want to mention is Gatekeeper will prohibit apps from launching if they're not signed. However, there's a workaround for that, that a lot of people know. You right click and you say open to bypass Gatekeeper. Well, we can tell Gatekeeper to not allow that. So you will only be able to launch authorized apps. Although we have run into some issues with developers, I think, who needed some apps that were not signed, which kind of boggles my mind. I mean, I understand the need, but if you're using apps that aren't signed in 2022, what apps are those? Ross, does anyone have a legitimate reason for not signing their apps?
You're going to see this a lot, especially with certain types of applications that are generated at point of need. If you go to a website and you log in, you get a very specific thing. It says, click here to download this. That's customized just for your account. A lot of times those packages that are created via automated processes will not be signed. And this can obviously turn into an issue. The other times we'll see this are if you're a developer, you're probably spending a lot of time on GitHub, and a lot of times these scripts, other smaller applications you're finding may not be signed by the developer, because the package or the application file needs to be edited once you download it, because you need to customize it, change the icon, change other information.
Yeah.
Especially for things like white label applications you find. And so there's a lot of business needs to allow Gatekeeper overrides, but those tend to be really, really specific to individual organizations, and often just individual users, development users inside of those organizations. And because of that, we thought that it was valuable to recommend the standard Gatekeeper policy with overrides disallowed, but we do have the option. We can make sure that the devices in your fleet that really require unsigned applications and packages have a way to get that done.
So most people can live with Gatekeeper enforced, but if you're a developer, you probably need the ability to open apps that are not signed and therefore bypass Gatekeeper.
I wouldn't even say probably, but if you do fall into that category, we've got you covered. Okay,
sounds good. And thanks for educating me on why somebody would need to bypass Gatekeeper. Okay, so Gatekeeper login window. Login window is the ability at the login screen to not list the usernames and passwords, right? Not list any accounts. You have to enter your credentials. You can have a custom end user license agreement shown, identifying who owns the machine. Disable auto login. Yes, that's a pretty poor practice these days to boot up a machine that automatically logs in. Disable console login. I don't even know exactly how to do that, Ross. I mean, console login. Yeah, not that we need to go into it.
Yeah, very few people deal with it. The main goal here is to make sure, and I got to clarify, you got to make sure for non-file vault encrypted machines. Because if you've got file vault, you're not going to see any of these controls, because you type in your password, the machine decrypts, and it takes you straight into your account. So hopefully most organizations don't need this, but if they do, we've got these controls to make sure that there's as many smaller protections. These are all tiny things that make a big difference in the long run to keep your devices secure. And so we're making sure that you can't, and someone who just boots up your machine doesn't immediately see the plain text name of the employee or employees. They don't display a hint that may, give them too much information about the password, things like that.
Yeah, you just mentioned something, Ross, I hadn't thought about, which is if File Vault is enabled, it does list the usernames, doesn't it?
It sure does. Word on the street is that there are controls for that coming in the future for Apple Silicon devices, not for Intel Macs. But for the time being, yes, you are going to get that plain text list of users who have decryption authority on your machine that do have that secure token. Yeah,
I would think Apple will eventually get to the point where you can apply this at the File Vault screen, which I'm sure will also mean people will forget their names and need to be reminded,
Oh, yeah.
or usernames. Okay, well, I think we're almost done. We're beyond time just a little bit. Passcode policy, this is a big one. Just having a minimum password policy with some standards, so you don't have users logging in with password 123.
And a quick reminder here, following NIST, we
yes.
do recommend against enforced password expiration. I understand there are a lot of security audits and specific audit thresholds that are going to still require this anyways. That's fine. If you aren't in an industry that does not explicitly require that, we do recommend following NIST's recommendations and having a complex password policy that makes strict requirements, but not forcing arbitrary changes to that policy.
Yeah, those forced changes are super frustrating for everyone. And we now know it's bad practice. So last one on the list is remote login and remote management. And Ross, I think to summarize this is basically saying, if you don't need remote access or remote management on, let's turn it off to be safe and only enable it when necessary. Our management tool allows us to enable it on the fly, but at a period of time of not using it, it will be disabled. Is that correct?
Correct. The basic idea is if you have a machine, one of your employees needs assistance on their Mac, they reach out to the support desk, our team can reach out to them, and our tools will automatically open the doors that we need to support their Mac. Great, we can get connected, walk them through something, and we're done, we close that out. And then when this maintenance item runs, you just make sure across your fleet that all those doors are closed and locked as anticipated. So this gives Ntiva the ability they need to support your devices while making sure that other actors don't have access to those same venues. The only time we would recommend against this would be if you're in an organization where for specific business practices or workflows, you need to have your Macs use these with each other, right? So if you have an employee that's in Bali, they need to connect to a data center and they use SSH to do that. Well, we got to make sure we don't close that door on them. That would be unfortunate. So
yeah,
things like that.
So thanks, Ross. In summary, this is the security standards we have today. And of course, security standards do change. So we will continue to improve on these. There are some other, this is not the end all be all of security. There are other things we could talk about, but this is what I wanted to focus on today. And then I just wanted to end with the idea of opt-in versus opt-out when it comes to security standards. I would say all of our security standards have been opt-in. We don't apply any of them unless a client tells us to, or they go through an audit, or we audit them and we make a recommendation. And then at that point, all of this must be communicated to your team. You really shouldn't just blindly enable this, especially across the fleet of computers and without communication, because you can imagine if somebody is accustomed at home to walk, they don't have a cat like me, so they just leave the computer and leave it logged in, and then they come back and expect it to be in the same state, but instead it's locked, and maybe they don't have finger ID, a touch ID, so they have to type in a password. That could get irritating. So you need to communicate why you're doing this before you do it. Now, we would like to get to a point where we might flip the script on some of these. File Vault is a good example. Immediately upon unboxing, let's try to force File Vault as soon as we can, as soon as it's appropriate, because it's easy, it works. There's really little to no downside to it on a modern day computer. So that would be a case of opt out. Like, we are going to enforce File Vault. Now we'll communicate that with you during the onboarding process, or if you're already a client as we make these changes. But then you'll need to communicate it with your team. And of course we can help you with that. But I would like everyone to think about that because eventually it would be nice to have the security standard applied and you opt out if you need to, or individuals opt out if there's a business use case. And again, communication is key. Okay, our next September 7th is Microsoft and Apple Love. So a lot of people still think because we're Apple, we don't like Microsoft, even though we live in the Microsoft world every day. So we're going to talk about that. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.